It's welcome to Sense of Style. I'm Stuart. Thanks for watching. Must-have fragrances. Actually, must is a very strong word. These are fragrances that would be nice to have. That's probably a little kinder word. And there are a lot of fragrances on this list that you will have heard of and that you will have desired at one point. And maybe you have some of them. Certainly a lot of fragrances on this list you will have heard of before, especially if you're a collector. But even if you're not. All right, so let's get started. And of course, we have to start with this. Acqua di Gio Profumo, recently discontinued. No, I'm not selling you that this is must-have in order to be a true collector. No, the parfum is very similar. By this, I mean, if you have any parfum of the number one fragrance DNA of all time, that's what I mean. That's a must-have. So if you have this or the new parfum, which I don't like as much because it doesn't have the incense that this has. However, it's still a nice fragrance. It's still Acqua di Gio. It's still a parfum. It's got great performance for what shouldn't really have a great performance. I mean, when you're talking C notes and citrus, to be able to get 7 or 8 hours, that's pretty good. So I've heard that the parfum has really good performance too, but this one I love just because the incense is a little bit of bite, a little bit of spice with this one, with that incense note. But I like incense and not everyone's the same. So yeah, that's number one of the must-have. Okay, number two is Issey Miyake L'Eau d'Issey pour Homme Noir Ombre, quite the mouthful. And this one is actually hard to get at times. It's kind of weird. When I started collecting in 2019, it wasn't available, and then it became available for like 24 hours, and then I grabbed a bottle. And then all of last year, it was available at one of the discounters, had it the whole, and now it's not available again. So this one, if you like the sound of it, I'm pretty sure it'll come back. It's usually at fragrancebuy.ca where you'll find this one. But this is very similar to Parfums de Marly's Habdan. And I know this because I have a travel spray of Habdan right here. Man, it smells so appley, it isn't funny. So Habdan is kind of a darker, richer, more resinous version of Layton, but it's not Layton. But they both have apple, they both have vanilla, they're both from Parfums de Marly, but this one's darker and deeper and richer. Doesn't seem to have the same popularity as Layton does, but this one is very similar to it. However, Habdan doesn't get a whole lot of respect from the fragrance community, but this gets tons of respect, and I think I know why. Both are very similar, but this has saffron. This doesn't actually have apple. It has vanilla, amber. It has leather that darkens it up a bit, and then it has saffron that freshens the whole thing up. Whereas this doesn't have the same amount of saffron. This one is darker, and it's harder to wear, I think, at the end of the day. That's why Habdan doesn't get the respect that this does. Now, this is not cheap. Habdan is like over $200. This is about 115, so it's not cheap either. But if you like the sound of something dark and mysterious, it will become available, I promise. Now, wearability is a factor that is somewhat of a theme on this list because this next fragrance, which is Ombre Leather by Tom Ford. Now, this one is, in terms of the Tom Ford line, this one has a really good wearability factor as well. Because when I first started collecting, this came out in 2018, I started collecting a year later. At the time, Tuscan leather was the sort of, first of all, this private line, so it was kind of up here in terms of the leather fragrance to have from Tom Ford. But over the last 4 years, Ombre Leather, I believe, has surpassed Tuscan leather. And I think it's a wearability factor. Personally, for me, I really like Tuscan leather. I like that hint of raspberry, the darkness. But in terms of wearability, like, leather is already hard to wear. It's a strong note. It's usually worn in the winter. It's a lot of projection. It's very powerful. But this one, it's got that amber. It's a sweetness. It's got the leather. But it's just a little bit lighter than Tuscan leather. You can wear it in more occasions. I think this one has surpassed Tuscan leather as the fragrance of choice. not just maybe for Tom Ford, but maybe for leather in general. Next up, we've got a niche fragrance, and this is the one I don't have. I do have a sample. I've had it for a while. This is Musc Ravageur by Frederic Malle, and this is just unbelievable. It was my favorite fragrance for a long time, but then I've tried so many that I just kind of have a top 5 or 6, and this is one of them. But what I like about this is the vanilla, and the way the vanilla in Musc Ravageur plays off with the cloves and the musk. So the vanilla is very sweet and very appealing, but you mix musk with cloves, which are quite bitter, and it's sort of a darkness. So you get the darkness of the cloves and the musk in contrast with the beauty and the sweetness of the vanilla. And it's just magical, and it just kind of goes back and forth, and it's almost like each one escalates the other one. And that sort of contrast can really make a fragrance. When it comes to contrast, this next fragrance is also remarkable, but it doesn't do it with contrasting scents. It does it with a contrast in texture. Talking about now, yeah, this is Dior Homme Intense. And I think a lot of people, most people would think of this as a must-have. This is #1 fragrance on Fragrantica for a couple of years in a row. Fragrantica tend to be collectors. This one is just fantastic. But what I mean by the contrasting textures is, on the one hand, you've got, and I've always heard people talk about how this is so creamy, the ambrette, which is like a seed, a mildly sweet seed, comes off as creamy. And then you've got the powdery iris on the other side. And, and like cream and powder are the exact opposites, really. One has no water, and the other one has a lot of water, and that's what makes it a cream, So you've got the sort of dryness with the moisture, and it just sort of plays back and forth. Contrasts are really cool. That's why, in drama, you've got the smiley face and the happy face, and it's kind of like our human existence boils down to the contrast. Now, I'm not going to get all philosophical, but I do find the contrasting notes here, and yeah, this really is a must-have if you're a hardcore guy. Next up, we've got an old school fragrance. Now, this is the only one on the list, but there's nothing wrong with old school. It's just is a different way of experiencing fragrances. This is Eau Sauvage from Christian Dior. Oh, sorry, that one. And this one has a magnetic cap. Love it. And I love this old style bottle. This is like 1970s, super classy. This style of bottle. My love for this has increased over time. It was super hyped up from a channel I was watching, and then I bought it, and I thought, well, it's nice, but it's just a citrus fragrance. But over time, the more citrus fragrances I find, the more I realize I appreciate the performance here. Good projection and good longevity, which is hard for a citrus fragrance. But also, it's Dior. The quality is really nice. The bottle's really nice. I just like having a really nice summer fragrance that I can look forward to. There's only 2 or 3 for me. I've got a lot more in the winter. It's just so classy. Next up, we've got this one. This is Dolce & Gabbana's The One. Now, this is the Eau de Toilette, and I know the popularity of the EDP is big, but, I've smelled the EDP a few times. The scent here is essentially the same, so I didn't feel the need to get the EDP. Now, the interesting thing about this, I always wondered, there's a lot of sweet tobacco fragrances out there. Why is this one and the EDP such a must-have for fragrance collectors? And then I figured it out. And it all goes back to Vera Wang, in 2004. Now, look at the similarities in the bottles here. Not that different. This came out 4 years before. And the key to this fragrance, and the key to Dolce & Gabbana's fragrance, is the freshness. Vera Wang is American. Her parents were Chinese, so she's got Chinese heritage. And they were making a sweet tobacco fragrance, but she wanted to have something that reflected her heritage. She wanted yuzu. Now, yuzu is a citrus fruit you get in the Far East. It's very fragrant. It's kind of like a clementine, like a yellow clementine, so it's an orangey quality to it too. But she wanted to use something like yuzu for the fragrance. So what they did was they took a sweet tobacco fragrance and they added some freshness to it with citrus from the yuzu. And boom, it's a fresh sweet tobacco. Now there's tons of sweet tobacco fragrances from niche. You've got Chergui, you've got Herod, and then on the designer side, you've got Calvin Klein CK1 Shock, and you've got Burberry London. There's a lot of sweet tobacco, and yet this one was the one that took off. And I think you can all owe it to the freshness and to probably Vera Wang's heritage, the freshness of the yuzu. Dolce & Gabbana borrowed that DNA 4 years later. I do give credit for Dolce & Gabbana, though. People appreciate the EDP for getting that extra hour or so of longevity. That really seemed to sort of be an important breakthrough in this fragrance line as well. So yeah, it's not all Vera Wang here, but the scent is. Okay, and finally, one of my all-time classics. It's another one I like more and more as I go on. It's Prada L'Homme, and there's not a, this bottle's half empty. That's not like me, but I just love this so much. If you want to know what Iris smells like, this is the one. This is an Iris bomb. It smells amazing. And it's the best representation, I believe, personally, of Iris. Now, it is the powdery Iris and not the sweet Iris. That's more on the Givenchy Gentleman line. But I like the powdery Iris, and I really like this fragrance. There's tons of it. And yes, it's been discontinued. You can still get bottles here and there. It was around for so long. But yeah, this to me is a must-have if you're a collector. And so are all these fragrances. They're all some amazing ones. And hopefully there's one you like here, too. Take care, guys.